Hi folks, it's Mayor Victoria Gearity with your weekend update. I was not live yesterday. I've decided I will only do one update for the weekend, but I do have a few items that we'll talk about. Before I get right into talking about the tax assessor questions, because that's something that we talked a lot about on Friday, and I've been collecting some questions from folks via email and Facebook since then, and I'll just review with you the questions that I've gotten that I'm going to be sharing with our tax assessor. But before I get to that, I did want to invite everyone at 3 o'clock today. I will be attending a virtual film festival online. It's hosted by the Detroit Free Press. Apparently in Detroit this time of year, they have a documentary film festival normally and held in venues all over the city. And since that's obviously not an option this year, they're doing it virtually, which means that we get to participate. But I believe the films are only available for us to view at the time of the screening. So at 3 o'clock today, I'm going to be tuning into, there's two documentaries about women and the role that they took on here in the home front in our factories during World War II. So I encourage you and invite you to participate. I believe I've already linked it on my Mayor Victoria Gearity page. I sent out an email to anybody who's on my personal or campaign email list this morning, and I'll make sure that I post that link also in the comments of this or the introduction of this video once I tune off or turn off for the afternoon, and hopefully I'll get to see you, or we'll share the experience at 3 o'clock. And tuning in, it is free for these two films. And I have a connection to one of the filmmakers. The first film is a 1-hour film called The Life and Times of Rosie the Riveter. And the second is an animated short documentary that is from a filmmaker that I have gotten to know because we've screened two of her films as part of the Ossining documentary and discussion series. One called The Home Stretch, which was about homelessness for youth. And the other, which was called Capturing the Flag, which followed campaign workers, poll workers, during the 2016 election. Anyway, her name is Ann DeMare, and she is the director of the animated short, The Girl with the Rivet Gun. And after each film, there'll be an interview, a conversation with the filmmakers as part of the festival. So hope you'll join me on that. We certainly are seeing women playing an integral role in our essential workers today. And of course, we're in a very different world today than we were during World War II. But there are certainly some similarities as far as there being a sense of community that is all experiencing this major upheaval in our lives, and addressing it in a local, national, and international way with a collective conscience that we all share. This morning, if you caught the governor's update, he talked a lot about rate of transmission. We've gotten the rate of transmission down to 0.8% in New York State. That's a good thing. That means we have brought it down significantly, and we have been holding fairly steady there. He talked a lot about the three factors that they consider in determining the rate of transmission. One of them that is the hospital rates. We have seen hospital rates stabilizing or decreasing for a number of days now. When that happens for 14 days, the CDC recommendation is that if a state and a region have seen 14 days of a reduction of hospitalization rates for COVID, then that's when they can start thinking about reopening, at least in phase one. The other two factors in the transmission rate he spoke about is the antibody testing, which we've just begun this week. And then there's always a couple of weeks lag in the antibody testing, because it takes some time from the time of contracting the virus to when that is visible in your system, but they have just gotten started with that, and obviously that needs to be much more widespread for us to have a real reliable number on that, and to see how it's increasing. Hopefully there's a noticeable difference in the antibody rate increasing. And then the third rate is the diagnostic testing, which is what we've been doing for the last 7 weeks. Ossining was on the forefront of doing that, which is just, are you positive right now for the COVID virus? And that will continue to expand as well throughout the state and the region. The first phase of reopening will likely be construction and manufacturing, where they can demonstrate there's low risk. for contracting the virus or spreading the virus in those environments. Then there will be a 2-week break between the phases to monitor if the reopening to that degree has had a detrimental impact on that rate of transmission. And then phase 2 would be an expansion of what are considered, more of the somewhat essential businesses, those that have a lower risk of sharing the infection. And so that is involving a lot of communication between the state and business owners and industry leaders to understand what precautions a business can put in place to demonstrate that they will not be adversely contributing to infection rates. So more of that to come. Sort of the most fun item that was discussed as far as potential openings is, would any major sporting events be able to take place without an audience? So if a sporting event can take place, whether it's baseball or basketball or soccer or whatever it might be, and if it's worth it to the players, if they can negotiate a contract with the players, if it's worth it to the owners and the industry to be able to host an event, a live event that we could all sit at home and watch on television, if they make enough money from doing that without the ticket sales, then we may get to see a ball game at some time, much sooner than we'll be able to sit in a crowd with thousands of people. That is definitely one of the last things that we'll see opening up the major events, sports events, concerts, festivals, anything that would draw people from another region is in that category of later phases. Okay, so I will just read to you the what I've collected so far, at least some of the highlights. There are a couple of other continuing questions that I'm going to be sharing with the tax assessor. I'll also let you know that the village trustees and I have been emailing for the last couple of days about what we'd like to see as far as our ability to get some more helpful answers from the tax assessor and make sure that the questions and concerns of our constituents are being heard. I think people understand that village and town government are different levels of government. If you live in the village of Ossining, I am your mayor. If you live in the unincorporated town of Ossining, I don't technically represent you, although you're part of the Ossining community, and I'm happy to hear from you and work with you and in many, many ways. But on election day, you don't get to vote for the mayor and the trustees. And we do not have any influence on your taxes. There are a lot of shared services between the village and the town of Ossining, and we have different relationships for what each of those shared services look like. In the case of tax assessment, it was back in the 1980s that the village government decided they would dissolve the village tax assessor's office, and all of the village properties would be assessed by the town tax assessor. So Fernando Gonzalez, who is the town tax assessor, does not report directly to the village board or to our village manager, but we do work well together, and he is part of our budget discussions every year so that we can understand what the assessment rolls look like this year and what we can anticipate. So it's a unique relationship that we have with the town tax assessor. So while tax assessment is not the role of village government, representing the concerns of the people in our community is our role, and understanding the implications of what this assessment role is going to have on our budget is the responsibility of every taxing entity, whether that's the village, the town, the county, the school district, the library. We all have to understand what the assessment roles mean for this year and what we can anticipate for next year, because this year's assessment rolls are reflective of real estate values last July 1st, 2019. A very, very different world. And that's the foundation for the first question that I'll reference. Someone has asked, can the 2019 assessment rates be held in place given the recent dramatic economic impact of the pandemic? So that question has been asked to Fernando. It's something that we will revisit. I have a feeling that our local tax assessor probably doesn't have the power to do that. It probably, because these guidelines and this process is directed by New York state law, I would imagine that would have to come from the governor. I don't know that the governor would be supportive of holding in place replace the year-old. It's actually more than a year old because we're always lagging behind in our assessment values, as is evidenced right now. I don't know if they'd hold that in place. There are a lot of factors that come into play with the assessment rolls, but we need to at least understand who has the responsibility for what and what the options are. Another question that came was somebody who was obviously paying attention when we went through the revaluation process, which took place in 2015, where it was explained to us that 1/3 of the properties are likely to go up, 1/3 are likely to go down, and 1/3 are likely to have very little change. And the question was, we pretty much saw that in 2015 when we had the overall revaluation. And this person asks, is that what you're seeing again now with the 2020 tax assessment rolls? I don't know that that's the case, because it seems to me, and this is me speculating as just someone who tries my best to understand municipal tax situations and the tax assessment. I'm certainly not a tax assessor. But in 2015, we had tax rolls that were, assessment rolls that were many, many decades out of date. And so there were houses that hadn't been reassessed in 45 years. And that's why we saw such a big change in the assessment rolls. In this case, I'm going to speculate, and I look forward to the tax assessor helping us better understand this, but that the changes that we're seeing are much more a reflection of what the changes in the real estate market were. Certainly in any individual case, if somebody did a lot of renovations to their house, if they increased their floor area ratio, if they went from a good condition house to an excellent condition house, then they would have seen an increase in their individual property. So I'm interested in understanding that, and that leads to another question that I'm asking the tax assessor, which is, it feels like, and I know there are thousands and thousands of properties in the town of Ossining, and the people who are most upset are the ones who are seeing the $50,000, $60,000, and $70,000 increase in their assessment value. So it seems like there was a very large jump this year, and that's surprising. And we know that there was an overall a 6% increase in the assessment rate for 1, 2, and 3 family homes. And so it is surprising we saw that big of a jump in 1 year, considering that since the revaluation every year, we've been updating the rolls to maintain a 100% assessment rate. So that's something that I want to understand better from Fernando Gonzalez. Why did we see such a big leap this year, considering we've been doing annual updates to our assessment rolls? And last but not least, not at all least, is what opportunity might we have for Fernando to speak with us in a public meeting like this? I know that the town board, I believe, has their regular Tuesday meeting coming up. This week, the village board does not have a meeting. It's a 5th Wednesday. If the town board doesn't have a meeting, then maybe we need to try and schedule something for later in the week. We would really like to have, I can email all these questions to Fernando. I can talk on the phone to Fernando, and then I can relay them to you, and anybody on the village board or the town council can do the same. But it would be better if we could hear directly from Fernando. So I'm going to be asking Fernando Gonzalez and the town supervisor who he reports to, what opportunity we can have, hopefully this week, to have a public virtual forum in a Zoom meeting, perhaps whether it's with the town board or the village board or whatever makes sense, to be able to have some of these questions addressed by Fernando himself. So hopefully we'll be able to make something like that happen this week. It's Sunday afternoon, so I'm gonna let Fernando Gonzalez enjoy the rest of his Sunday, and I will be following up with him on Monday, and I'll let you know as soon as if there's something scheduled. Or if he, any responses that he provides to me. And if you still have questions you'd like to have included, please email me at Gearity@villageofossining.org. Anything you put in the comments here, I'll take a look at that as well as I put together my list of questions for the tax assessor. All right, so with that, I will just say enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and perhaps you will be enjoying it in the same way that I will at 3 o'clock with the free documentary screening being provided at the, it's actually called called the Freep Fest, which is normally held in Detroit, but because it's virtual this year, we all get to tune in and it's free. And I look forward to seeing the films and seeing the interviews with the documentary filmmakers following their films. About the role that women played on the home front during World War II. The famous poster of Rosie the Riveter is also the poster for the first film and sums up very well what we're going to be learning more about. It profiles particular women that were in those roles. They were the real life Rosie the Riveters. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, and we'll see what more information I have to share then. Be well.